We anaesthetize ourselves with all sorts of fake satisfactions. We spend, hours and hours and hours scrolling through our feeds, but getting the next high, the next dopamine feed. We become complacent, self-satisfied people. We're like travelers lost in the wood. When we see a signpost getting us back on the right path, it's a great moment. And we might begin to fixate upon the signpost. But the signpost is only pointing away from itself, and even if it's made of, gold and its letterings are of silver, it's still not the thing itself. You've got to continue on the journey and not fixate upon the milestones and the signposts, however attractive they may be.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlie. I'm with Dr. Michael Ward, and we're here to talk about the topic of longing, and particularly longing and C.S. Lewis. Michael, would you first be able to just introduce yourself for us, please?
Yeah, hi Charlie, good to be with you. Thanks for having me. I work here at the University of Oxford. I study and write about C.S. Lewis, the author of the Narnia books. We're here in the magnificent chapel of Keble College, Oxford, and although Lewis was never a student here, or a fellow, he had an important connection to Keble because as a young man, just as a 19-year-old trainee officer in the British Army during the First World War, he was billeted here and did his officer's training here. So that was an important milestone in his own life.
You've just come back from a C.S. Lewis conference in America.
And so have you. We were there together. It was great to see you there giving a paper on Lewis and longing.
I was talking on Lewis and particularly longing in some of his non-Christian poetry, actually, his first published work, Spirits in Bondage. So I was talking about how the building blocks of longing really start in Spirits in Bondage and develop and find fulfillment in his later Christian fiction. And I did my dissertation on longing, so that's part of my background. That's why I'm interested in this subject as well. So I'm excited to be talking about it with you.
C.S. Lewis, as you say, had a great interest in longing, yearning, the desire for we know not what, which he said accompanied him throughout his whole life. His autobiography is called Surprised by Joy, and joy basically means longing.
Yeah.
This inconsolable longing or yearning for you know not what, which accompanied him his whole life. And he said that the central story of his life is about nothing other than joy. These almost ecstatic, transcendent experiences of desire, a pang, a stab, he says, of longing or yearning, which came to him through memory of his own past, through reading poetry, through experiences of the beauty of the natural world. Any number of things communicated this desire, he said. It was an unsatisfied desire, which was itself more desirable than any other satisfaction. And unpacking that, trying to work out why these experiences came to Lewis was really important in his own philosophical and spiritual development.
He gives another name for longing, doesn't he, as well? Would you mind giving us that name?
A German word.
Not least because I won't be able to pronounce it.
Sehnsucht.
Sehnsucht, yeah.
What does it mean? What's the German origin, the etymology?
It comes from the German Romantic tradition. I think the Sen means looking,
right,
and the Zucht is desire. So I think merging those together.
Sehnsucht, yearning, longing, desire, joy. These are all synonyms for this thing which is hard to describe, hard to define, yet it's quite a common experience. Lots of people have it. Most people don't bother to explore it as carefully as Lewis did. Some people suppress the desire. They they realize it's not going to be satisfied easily in this life, so they look for things which can be satisfied. And this is one of the major problems Lewis identifies, that when you find that the joy comes through, artistic experiences, music or painting or anything like that, or relationships with other people, you begin to focus in on the thing that communicates the desire to you, and you in other words become rather addicted. I think Lewis identifies longing as a very common human experience, especially in childhood, before adult concerns come in and smother our receptivity to this. But ultimately, I think he sees it as a desire for the divine, for the infinite, the immortal, and he believes that all human beings have that, because all human beings have been made in the image of their creator, God, and that finitude and mortality and death are not our natural, not our proper confines, that we're made for something greater, something beyond this world. I think he saw it as a characteristically human experience, to desire something more, whatever that may be connected with. Any pleasure that we find, we want more of it. We want more beauty, we want more goodness, we want more truth. We pine, Lewis says, for something which is completely and utterly satisfying. We get temporary satisfactions in food and relationships and the beauty of the natural world, or aesthetic rapture, beautiful music, whatever it may be. But we still haven't found what we're looking for, to quote Bono.
Bono,
yes.
Yeah, you too, that's right.
We're all looking for that ultimately satisfying thing, whatever our beliefs, whatever our traditions. That's a completely fundamental, natural human experience. And Lewis, in his autobiography, says that as soon as you begin talking about these desires and your own experiences of them, nearly always the person you're speaking to will say, "Oh, what, you too? I didn't realize that everybody had." And it turns out that it is a very common experience, especially in childhood, when we're still relatively innocent and uncluttered by adult pressures and concerns. Other things come in and kind of squelch and smother the desire if we're not careful. And one of Lewis's points is that we need to keep alive in ourselves this desire, because it represents one of the best parts of us. Lewis puts it like this in one of his books. He says, if I find in myself a desire for something that this world does not seem to satisfy, maybe the best explanation of that is that I was made for something other than this world. It's suggestive. It's an argument to the best explanation, as it were. You have all these data. Well, suppose that you were created for an infinite, immortal existence. Well, that would help explain why you have infinite and undying desires.
Why don't I just read this out from The Weight of Glory?
A sermon Lewis preached.
In Oxford?
Here in Oxford. Not in this chapel,
No.
but at the university church.
Yeah,
yes.
That's right. The books or the music in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trust to them. It was not in them, it only came through them, and what came through them was longing. These things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. But if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshippers. For they are not the thing itself, they are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. Now Lewis talks about various images there to describe, to try and capture this experience of longing. Now he's not saying that those images are wrong or immoral in any way? I know he says there they break the hearts of their worshippers. What's he getting at there in that passage?
Well, they break their hearts of their worshippers if they are focused on too exclusively, as if when they are mistaken not as vehicles of desire, but as the substantial containers of desire.
Yeah.
It's like any kind of addiction. You get addicted to drugs because drugs give you the high, but it's the high that you want. But because you can only get the high through the drugs, you need more and more powerful injections of the drug to get the same result. If you're addicted to, relationships, you want more and more sex so that you can get the same outcome. It's the law of diminishing returns. That's the problem, because you're mistaking the source of the desire with the communicator of the desire. It's not in them, it comes through them, as Lewis says in that bit you just quoted. And that's idolatry, isn't it? An idol is literally something that is seen. But what we want in desire, in joy, in longing, is something which is unseen. Which, this is one of the classic definitions of the divine, that God is a spirit, God is beyond our human senses. And this is why, in classic Judeo-Christian teaching, you shall not make for yourself any graven image, because you're then, as it were, confining the indefinable, which is, a category error of the most grievous kind.
In that passage that we just read out from The Weight of Glory, Lewis mentions the memory of our past. How was childhood significant to Lewis's conception of longing?
Well, the very first occasion when he experienced longing came to him through a memory. He talks about this in his autobiography, Surprised by Joy. That he says, there arose in me as if, while he's still a young boy, there arose in me as if from the depth, not of years, but of centuries, an earlier morning when my brother had brought into the house a toy garden on a biscuit tin lid, twigs and leaves and moss. And Lewis remembered this earlier morning, and he said it evoked in him a desire for something so intense that the only way to talk about it really is by reference to the Garden of Eden, that he wanted to go not just back a few years into his own past, but back to the very origin of humanity itself, which is absurd. Here's a 7-year-old boy, or however old he was, having immortal longing. And later in life, when he began reading writers like William Wordsworth, he saw that Wordsworth was talking about this all the time. And indeed, in The Weight of Glory, Lewis refers to William Wordsworth and how Wordsworth's expedient was to associate joy with his own past. And he was always, summoning up memories of earlier days and thinking, if only I could get back to that time, I would be happy.
Lewis makes the helpful point that if we went back to childhood, if we went back to the moment where we thought that the beauty was located, actually when we're a child, we're thinking about the future often. We're dreaming about things in the future. So whether we're stuck in the past or thinking about the future, I think Lewis would urge us to be confronted with the reality that actually these longings aren't in this world at all.
Yeah, exactly. They're not time-bound. If you went back to that earlier moment in your own past, you would find either a desire for something even further back, or, as you say, a desire for an unknown future. But actually, it's not present in any given moment. And that's the mistake we make. That's when we become idolatrous, when we do mistake the vehicle for the thing itself. Joy always reminds, Lewis says. Joy is never quite present. It's fleeting, it's fugitive. You must kiss it as it flies. But if you catch it, then you destroy it.
To say that these desires then, or these longings, can never be fulfilled in this life is pretty hard-hitting, isn't it? I mean, I think it sort of goes against the grain of our culture at the moment that says that if you do this or that, then you can fulfill your dreams and fulfill these longings. Have you personally had any experiences like that?
Yeah, I think I have, and I've made the same mistake that Lewis identifies. I remember when I was in my mid-20s, I had a very happy time on a holiday with three friends. We imitated C.S. Lewis's own favourite way of having a holiday, a walking tour. We went out into the English countryside and we walked each day from one pub to the next. We weren't camping, we were putting up in inns and hotels. And it's a great way of having a holiday. And I remember one sunny afternoon, a beautiful summer's day, we came to this open stretch of river with a small waterfall and a pool behind it and willows overhanging it. And the temperature was just right. We were hot and sticky from our morning's walk, and we just stripped off and plunged into this water. And it was refreshing, and we were free and healthy and young, and it was a glorious moment. And I remember thinking, this is such a special moment. A few months later, I thought, I'm going to go back to that place. And I did. I drove out of my way to get back to that pool, that riverside. But it was grey, it was cold, my friends weren't there. I had not just, exhausted myself from a happy morning's walk. It was all sludgy and dreary. And this is precisely the error that Lewis identifies, that if you associate the joy with the communicator of the joy, you're making a major error, because it's not in them, it comes through them. And I'd made the classic error. It was a kind of idolatry. It taught me better than anything that, as Lewis puts it in Surprised by Joy, joy cares nothing for temples that are built, but only for temples building. That is to say, that are alive, that are still vivid and active, but not, as it were, complete. Because as soon as they're complete, as soon as they're defined, they go dead and cold. Because what we're talking about, in Lewis's view, is something that is beyond our spatio-temporal experience. It's divine. It's something that, by definition, God is immortal and infinite. And if you define the infinite, you're going against its own nature. All people in all places at all times have had these sorts of longings. In our own day, in our own culture, we're more fixated upon certain particular mediators of the longing that come to us through electronic media. This is partly why we become fixated with our screens, because we look at our screens and we see beautiful people, beautiful landscapes, we hear beautiful music, but it's all mediated through the screen. So we want more and more of the screen.
We want to go through.
Yeah. But we spend hours and hours and hours scrolling through our feeds, but getting the next high, the next dopamine feed. All the while, it's not in the thing itself; it's coming through it, and we need to get beyond. It's transcendent.
C.S. Lewis describes joy or longing as a kind of unhappiness. What's going on there?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's paradoxical. He describes it sometimes as a pang or a stab, something that is inconsolable. And I think that's an important part of it, that this is one of the reasons why we allow it to die on us, or we take steps to almost prevent joy from coming upon us, because it reminds us of that thing which we long for but cannot satisfy. It weakens us like a wound, Lewis says. in one place. And in the Weight of Glory sermon, he says that when mention of this joy becomes imminent in very intimate conversation, we become uncomfortable. We affect to laugh at ourselves. We take our revenge on it by dismissing it as nostalgia or adolescence. Our commonest expedient, he says, is to label it beauty and act as if that had done with it. But nonetheless, we pine, he says. If we're still honest with ourselves, this thing is still alive within us and pulling us somewhere, we're not quite sure where, but it's painful. Because it reminds us of our finitude, our mortality, that we're not quite connected to the thing we desire, which is sad for us. This is part of the pain of being a human being, that we're not complete. But we find that so intolerable that we pretend that we are complete. And we become, comfortably numb. Is that another phrase from Bono? I have become comfortably numb. We numb ourselves. We anesthetize ourselves with all sorts of fake satisfactions. We become, complacent, middle-aged, self-satisfied people. And that's why, particularly young people, children and teenagers, they look at the older generation and I don't want to be like that, because they've killed the nerve, as it were, of what it means to be truly human. And that is, alas, the case with so many of us as we age, that we forget this deep, true part of ourselves, and we cover it up. Another thing that Lewis wrote, I know you like this novel, is his last novel, Till We Have Faces, which most people haven't read or even heard about, but Lewis regarded it as easily his best book. And in that story, the protagonist is a woman called Orwell, who is a queen of a barbarian kingdom in ancient times. And her great desire is for her beautiful sister, Psyche. This is a retelling of an ancient Greek myth. And you remember how Orwell, in that novel, loses Psyche. Psyche is sacrificed and dies. But Orwell never forgets her love for her sister. But the love is so potent and so agonizing that any memory of it, Orwell tries to cover over. And it's particularly communicated to her through the swinging of the chains of the well. And Orwell builds a brick covering for the well, and larger covering, so that the sound of this swinging of the chain won't come to her at night, because she finds it so unbearable. And that's a very good image of how we deal with joy. We want it, but we don't want it at the same time. And that's why it's so hard to talk about. It's inexpressible, it's ineffable, and yet we all know it deep within ourselves. It's the secret signature of the soul, Lewis says. So, why would we want to pick at that scab, as it were? Rather than weakening with the wound, we allow it a cicatrice to grow over it. And as a result, we lose the most tender and intimate part of ourselves.
At the end of Till We Have Faces, there's a quote about longing for the God of the mountain. She says that the God of the mountain has been wooing me all my life. And she says, I'm going to my lover. So I think it's clear that Lewis had something in mind as to what we're longing for. Could you explain that quote a little bit more?
Yeah,
please?
well, at the end of Till We Have Faces, Orwell, the queen who the story is about, realizes that she's been looking for the solution to her problem in the wrong place. She says to the God of the mountain, I see now, Lord, why you offer no answer. You are yourself the answer. She had been looking for an answer in words, a satisfying explanation for, her life and her longings. But what are words? Words to be led out to battle against other words. You are yourself the answer. What other word could suffice? And so translating that into Christian language, we often talk about Jesus Christ as the Word of God, the living Word, living and active. And it's God we want, not some mere translation of God into some formula or some, easy, glib, trite phrase that we can, as it were, get our mind around. I think, oh, got it. No, as soon as you've got it, you've not got it. These experiences of joy are like signposts. They remind us of where we're heading, where we're wanting to get, at any rate. And we're like travelers lost in the wood. When we see a signpost getting us back on the right path, it's a great moment. And we might begin to fixate upon the signpost. But the signpost is only pointing away from itself. And even if it's made of gold and its letterings are of silver, it's still not the thing itself. We would be at Jerusalem, Lewis says. That's the destination of our pilgrimage. And you've got to continue on the journey and not fixate upon the milestones and the signposts, however attractive they may be. Lewis says, inexorably joy proclaimed, you want, I myself am your want of something other, outside, not you or any state of you. I did not yet ask who is the desired, only what is the desired. But this brought me already into the region of awe, for I thus understood that in deepest solitude there's a road right out of the self, a commerce with something which, by refusing to identify itself with any object of the senses, or anything whereof we have biological or social need, or anything imagined, or any state of our own minds, proclaims itself sheerly objective, far more objective than bodies, for it is not, like them, clothed in our senses. The naked other, capital O, imageless, though our imagination salutes it with 100 images, unknown, undefined, desired. That's a great passage that Lewis has, as it were, gone through a sort of an autobiographical inventory of all his desires, physical, social, aesthetic, intellectual. Is this what I want? Is this what I want? No, however much I have of any of these things, I still want something more. And that's what leads him to conclude that it's something extra human, it's extra mortal, it's not in the realm of finitude, it's infinite. Now what's a good description of something which is infinite, undying and beyond human capacity? Well, a very common way of talking about that is to call it God, or the gods, to the ancient Greeks that Lewis is, as it were, channeling in Till We Have Faces. In Lewis's own Christian context, he's talking about the Christian God, who makes himself known to us in the person of Jesus Christ, that we can become acquainted with this unknown, inaccessible God, because God makes himself accessible to us. It comes down in the person of Jesus Christ to a kind of manageable, relatable form, becomes one of us. And that, for Lewis, was the culmination of his pilgrimage, that Jesus Christ is the Word of God, living and active, the Word made flesh, dwelling among us. And that's not an answer in words, it's the answer of a person. And there's nothing more valuable than personal knowing. At the very end of his autobiography, after he's become a Christian, he says, I believe that the old stab, the old bitter sweet, has come to me as often and as sharply since my conversion to Christianity as at any time of my life whatever. So he's still having these feelings. But they now have a different valency, they now have a different importance, because he no longer confuses them with the destination. He's now sorted that error out. He says, I now know that the experience, considered as a state of my own mind, had never the kind of importance I once gave it. It was valuable only as a pointer to something other and outer. While that other was in doubt, the pointer naturally loomed large in my thoughts. When we are lost in the woods, the sight of a signpost is a great matter. He who first sees it cries, "Look!" The whole party gathers round and stares. But when we've found the road and are passing signposts every few miles, we shall not stop and stare. In other words, he's resumed his journey to the destination, which is getting to know God more and more and more deeply. And that is an infinite relationship because God himself is infinite. You can never come to the end of God by definition because God is infinite. And that's the answer to our longings. The infinite God. And Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to God except through Jesus. I'm a Christian. I've been raised in a Christian family and really kind of all my life considered myself a Christian. Though, as with all relationships, it grows, it's alive, it's not static. And indeed, as soon as it becomes static, it dies. A body that is not growing in some form or other, however slowly, is a dead body. But it's a very difficult thing to talk about, a deeply meaningful relationship. I mean, even in natural terms, married couples, when they start talking about their relationship with their husband or wife, if they are talking about it at all deeply, they soon run up against the fact that what they're really trying to talk about is something inexpressible. Because if it could be converted into words, then the words would be sufficient. But of course, the thing itself is the thing itself, not any form of words. And that's a mistake that I think a lot of people make when they talk about religious experiences or even aesthetic experiences. You act as if the translation were an adequate summary of the thing you're trying to talk about. Lewis explains the inexplicable nature of this longing better than anybody, especially in Surprised by Joy. Surprised by Joy has often been criticized as being a bit anticlimactic. That at the end of the story, after we've had 250 pages of searching and longing and seeking and philosophizing, what happens? Apparently not very much. Lewis says at the end of his own pilgrimage, I was driven to Whipsnade Zoo one sunny day. When we set out for the zoo, I did not believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. When we reached the zoo, I did. Yet the journey had not been spent in any great thought, nor in any great emotion. There was no storm of passion, there was no iron resolution. The whole man had moved, he says. There was no part of me left over or outside the act. And it's that holistic aspect of the experience which makes it difficult. It's not any particular part of you or the experience. It's the whole thing. And the whole thing can never be adequately summarized by definition. Because as soon as you summarize it, it's no longer the whole, it's just a part. And then you're not talking about the thing itself. So you're in a bind, you're caught. This is the paradox. Lewis often talks about two ways of knowing, that we can contemplate something from the outside or we can enjoy it from the inside. And it's the enjoyment experience from the inside that is the real experience of joy. And that can only be understood from within. So at the end of the story, at the end of his account of his conversion, the crucial sentence of the whole book, I think, is when he finally arrives at Whipsnade Zoo. It's not Jerusalem now, it's just Whipsnade Zoo, this zoo, about an hour's drive from Oxford. And he says, Wallaby Wood, this is a little enclosure of the zoo with wallabies, Wallaby Wood with the birds singing overhead and the bluebells underfoot and the wallabies hopping all round one was almost Eden come again. Now that's the crucial climactic sentence of the whole account, if you ask me. Remember how the early experience of joy with the biscuit tin had evoked in Lewis longings for the Garden of Eden. And now, in this enclosure at Wallaby Wood, it's almost Eden come again. You know, the story begins and ends with references to Eden, and that's no accident. Lewis was too good a writer to bookend the whole story, accidentally with these references to Eden. It's deliberate. The implication is that Lewis has come home. He's found paradise, or at least as much of paradise as can be experienced in this life. It's almost Eden come again. And he describes it not in a long, flowery description, but with just one single sentence that has three parts to it. Birds overhead, bluebells underfoot, wallabies hopping all around one. Above him and below him and all around him are symbols of beauty and colour and life. And he's inside this circle of life, you might say. He's enveloped in this experience. He's embraced by his love of God and God's love for him. And that's what it's all about. And Lewis was a poet, and he chooses these images very carefully and economically, you might say, to put the reader in the experience, in as far as that's possible. But because it's so brief, a lot of readers just steamroller over that sentence, and they think, well, what's happened to him? Not much seems, where are the choirs of angels singing hallelujah? Where is his heart being strangely warmed, like John Wesley when he has his conversion experience? But John Wesley's strangely warmed heart was only a pointer, again, to something going on inside John Wesley. It's not the heartwarming that matters, it's what the heartwarming signifies. And we mistake the signpost for the thing signified. That's Lewis's whole point. So you've got to read Surprised by Joy, I think, in a very sympathetic attitude. You've got to try to get on his frequency and imagine from within what it would have meant for Lewis to be surrounded by beauty and colour and life. That's the closest he can get to communicating the incommunicable. But a lot of people, as they're talking about religious experiences, mistake the description of the thing for the thing itself. And that's why it's so hard to talk about faith in any really meaningful fashion. Because faith is not just talk. It's life. It's your life, your heart, your soul, your everything. And how can you talk about everything? You can put the reader into a place with certain sensory impressions working upon the subject, and that's, poetically speaking, quite a good way of trying to express the inexpressible. But again, it has to be indirect. It has to be suggested, not stated, because as soon as you state it, as soon as you define it, you destroy it. That's the whole thing. You have to kiss it as it flies. I mean, that's a phrase from William Blake, I think, the Romantic poet. You can't catch it in a net of words, or at least only very briefly and implicitly. But that's the great thing about poetry, that it expresses the inexpressible. And that's why we turn to poets to communicate to us the thing that we're not clever enough to communicate ourselves. At the end of Surprised by Joy, Lewis says, I had hoped that the heart of reality might be of such a kind that we can best symbolize it as a place. Instead, I found it to be a person, capital P. And indeed, not just a singular person, but the three-personal God of Christianity, the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I think it's that tripartite relationship that he's trying to evoke at the end of Surprised by Joy when he's talking about the birds overhead, the bluebells underfoot, the wallabies hopping all round one, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You're caught up into that three-dimensional life, that dance, that drama, he says. That's what it means to know God, to love God, to become a son or a daughter of God, to be caught up into that divine life. In natural human relations, we don't relate to Trinitarian beings. You're not a Trinity, I'm not a Trinity. I mean, we have, hopefully, if we're Christians, we have some... We reflect, to a certain extent, the Trinitarian life. That this is, St. Augustine, isn't it? Our hearts are restless till they rest in Thee. And if God is himself Trinitarian, we naturally become more complete, more multidimensional ourselves. So those are some of the reasons why language of place is suitable for talking about personhood, personality.
It's quite common in society today, isn't it, to long for a place. We believe that we can find ourselves on a gap year.
Yeah, or on that, superb package holiday to the Bahamas or wherever it may be.
Yeah.
Yeah, or backpacking in the Peruvian mountains, yeah.
So how would Lewis then speak into those common cultural assumptions that we will become fulfilled when we go to that place?
I mean, that's just a geographical expression of this spiritual truth, that this desire, still wandering and uncertain of its object, as Lewis puts it in Surprised by Joy. I mean, we translate that into backpacking and sightseeing and tourism. But however many places we go, however many wonders of the world we behold with our own eyes, we're still unsatisfied. This is the whole point. Which is to say nothing against travel and sightseeing, but as Lewis puts it, quoting, I think, Dr. Johnson, he who would bring back the wealth of the Indies must take the wealth of the Indies with him. In other words, you've got to burrow down into the deep, dark roots of the question, which is ultimately a spiritual and a religious question, not a question of just sheer physical location, of whether you're on a particular mountaintop or not. Though, of course, mountaintops are great images of this internal spiritual experience.
What would you say would be a good entry point for someone looking to go deeper into this topic of longing?
Yeah, The Weight of Glory, which is a sermon Lewis preached here in Oxford, is a great distillation of his thoughts on this topic, expressed at greater length in his autobiography, Surprised by Joy. Those are two of the things to read if you want to explore Lewis on this topic more thoroughly. An action point, just sort of personally, existentially for people is, do not confuse the vessel of beauty with the beauty itself. It is not in them, it only comes through them, and what comes through them is longing. Now, by the way, I've always been interested in Lewis's choice of the word come. What comes through them is longing. What comes through them? You might expect him to be saying the opposite. What goes through them is longing. What goes through me to the source is the longing. But no, what comes through them is longing, Lewis says, which is a very interesting inversion of the whole dynamic. It's almost as if he's implying that it's God's longing for us that we experience when we long for God. And I think theologically, that's actually quite a deep truth, that we would not be looking for God if God were not looking for us. It's a reciprocal, it's a mutual relationship, which I think Lewis subtly hints at in that unexpected verb. Then Lewis himself gives advice in Mere Christianity. He says, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, that does not prove that the universe is a fraud. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it, to suggest the real thing. If that is so, I must take care, on the one hand, never to despise or be unthankful for these earthly blessings, and on the other, never to mistake them for the something else of which they are only a kind of